They urged her to perform on the violin for a laugh, but when she played, the entire room fell silent, breathless. No one bothered to mask their shock. It was during the 5th class, back row near the window, where Lena Carver always perched. Same place, same stillness, same weathered violin case cradled between her legs as if it were fragile porcelain. She seldom glanced upward, unless summoned, and even then her words were sparse, just enough to get by. A reserved girl striving to fade into the background, yet that day she stole the spotlight, though not in a way anyone might crave. "Okay, everyone," declared Mr. Hensley, the gym coach oddly tasked with overseeing the school's imminent talent. "Night, we've got openings. Vocalists, movers, tricksters, show us what you've got." His tone wavered between jest and earnestness, as if he questioned his own role in the proclamation. Then it happened. Mrs. Tate, the algebra instructor, clad in her eternal khaki cardigan, acting as if she owned the place, bumped Mr. Hensley's arm and nodded toward Lena's spot. "How about our tiny maestro over there?" she quipped, her smirk audible to half the room. Hensley snickered without a second thought. "Sure, Carver, let's see what that contraption can do. You've lugged it around forever. Time to make it pay off." The classroom erupted in chuckles. Not the sharp, cutting kind, but a slow-building ripple, cloaked as light-hearted ribbing. Lena sensed its true nature, a challenge, not support, not admiration, just a prank. They figured she'd miss the hint, or worse, not care. Her grip tightened. On the violin case's neck, her eyes stayed down, for now. Up front, a guy muttered something about feline wails. Another mimed a shrill grating chord. It spilled over like ink, chaotic, swift, hard to erase. Mrs. Tate beamed as if she'd offered a kindness. "Only poking fun, dear," she tossed out, waving it away like a stray thread. That's when Lena's gaze lifted, forward, past the teachers, past the peers, into the void. "I'll do it," she stated, steady and cool, like she was grabbing a burger at a takeout window. The room hushed instantly. Even Hensley faltered, blinking. For real? Lena didn't echo her words. No need. She eased the violin case from her lap, set it on the table, and began scribbling on the sign-up sheet circulating the desks. No fuss, no glances, just her name, Lena Carver, etched on the line. Mrs. Tate chuckled again, quieter this time. "That's the attitude, I suppose." Yet beneath her grin lurked a hint of unease, perhaps disbelief. She'd banked on Lena backing down. She'd expected retreat. The day rolled on, as it typically did. Bells chimed, lockers clanged, shoes scraped the corridors. But a subtle change brewed beneath it all. Here's the kicker. They didn't truly know her. They pegged her as a muted black girl who rarely spoke, hauling a violin to class like she was begging to stand out. They had no clue about the third-floor flat she shared with her mother and young sibling, or how she rehearsed with a rag jammed under her door to muffle complaints from next door. They didn't grasp that the violin wasn't a pastime. It was her sole possession that felt wholly hers, and soon they'd all witness it. Still, agreeing didn't erase her fear. Her name didn't linger in people's minds easily. Lena Carver didn't shine in the corridors of Riverside Middle School. She wasn't bold, didn't loiter by the snack machines, didn't bite back at sly remarks hissed behind hands. She kept moving, violin case ever present, posture slightly hunched, as though she'd adapted to claiming less room than she merited. Yet, if you trailed her home, trekked the 4 blocks from school, passed beneath the washed-out mural off Jefferson Avenue, and ascended the uneven steps to apartment 3B, you'd meet the true Lena, not the one who murmured in lessons, but the one thriving in a tempest of melody. The violin case snapped open the moment the door clicked shut. No snack break, no screen time, just her notes, and the flaking paint in her shared room. Her mother's voice drifted softly from the kitchen. "You back, sweetie?" "Yeah. Eaten yet?" "Not hungry. Eat something. Don't make me march in there." Lena cracked a faint smile. Her mom always tossed out that threat, and she meant it, but she stayed out, not when Lena was playing. Her mother, Sylvia Carver, scrubbed offices downtown overnight. She headed out at 6:30 each evening, post-dinner, returning just shy of sunrise. Lena knew she was weary. She also knew her mom tuned in from beyond the wall nightly. The deal was clear, no speakers, no earbuds, just pure sound. If Lena's pitch wobbled or her tempo slipped, her mom would rap lightly on the wall thrice. That signaled a redo, no frustration, no judgment, just perfect it. "One more time, sweetie," her mom would call, even from the hall. Most evenings, Lena played until her fingers lost feeling. Her violin wasn't sleek, marked by prior owner's scratches, a wobbly peg she adjusted constantly, and a bow unraveling, like worn twine. But it sang under her touch. It wailed, it roared, it murmured. It was her lone way to shout. She'd begun at 7. Her granddad, gone by her 9th year, had strummed blues on a battered fiddle. She recalled his chuckle, his fingers, gliding like they waltzed, and his mantra, "Let the strings spill your soul when words fail." So she did. At school, peers groaned when she unpacked her violin during lunch rehearsals. Staff offered polite grins, but never pride. Not until the jest, not until Hensley and Tate spun her year into a gag. But Lena had been crafting something, a composition of her own, half orchestral, half blues, pure ache. It bore no title. She saw no need. It held emotion, rawness, spirit, and a mystery only she and her violin shared. For beneath that calm, beneath the faded sweatshirt and scuffed kicks, Lena Carver was a hurricane. And now she'd unleash it. Still, craving proof is one thing. Facing a full school to deliver it is another. Next day, the roster hung by the main office window, beside the busted snack dispenser. Kids clustered, tracing the list, hunting familiar names, craving chaos, betting on flops. Lena's name rested at slot 16. Some peered, doubting it was real. "Who's Lena Carver?" one asked, gnawing a pencil tip. "That violin chick." Another replied, "Mute, bet she'll pluck Twinkle Twinkle and bawl." Giggles followed, always giggles after. Lena didn't waver. She strode by like their words were air. Truth was, she caught every syllable, logged it, tucked it into her core like kindling. At lunch, Mr. Hensley loomed near the hoops, feigning interest in the sign-ups. "Show's Friday," he bellowed. "No backing out now." He glimpsed Lena at the yard's edge, tweaking her violin on her lap. "Ready, Carver?" he hollered, smirking. She shot him a stare, not hostile, not warm, just empty, like he didn't merit the effort of a reply. He arched a brow and pivoted. In the staff room, Mrs. Tate nursed her coffee, skimming the act list. "Honestly, who greenlit her?" she questioned. "Jibbing at Lena's name. She put herself down," said Ms. Ortiz, the art teacher. "Equal shot as anyone." Mrs. Tate shook her head. "It's not about shots, it's about sense. She's asking for it. Think she'll hold up on stage." "Maybe she shocks you," Ms. Ortiz countered, resuming her puzzle. Mrs. Tate stayed mum, but her clenched jaw hinted she wasn't set to concede she could be off. That afternoon, Lena perched on her bed's edge with her violin and an empty notepad. Her mom lingered in the doorway, drying her hands on a cloth. "You dead set on this?" she asked. Lena dipped her chin, eyes fixed down. "Already agreed." Her mom stepped in, sat beside her, lifting the tattered bow. "You don't need to show off for folks who don't even clock you. Know that, right?" "Not, and for them." "Then who?" Lena paused, gaze drifting to a ceiling crack. "Me, I reckon." Her mom grinned, tugged her near. "Then nail it." At school, murmurs swelled as the week wore on. Kids wagered. Some bet she'd bolt, others she'd lock up. A few mused she might play for real, but snickered anyway. Only one kid spoke to her, Jamal, a gentle 7th grader who tickled keys after hours. He jogged up by the library. "Original or a classic?" Lena blinked. "Original." He beamed. "Smart. Give 'em something they can't stack against anything." She didn't grin back, but tipped her head once. That sufficed. Friday hit quick. The gym morphed into a stage, folding seats, scratched floors, creaky mic. Parents would trickle. In later, now it was just pupils and staff, acts rolled out one by one, crooners, twirlers, a kid spouting puns. Claps varied, some curt, some forced. Phones glowed, all was filmed, all awaited a stumble. Lena sat backstage, violin across her thighs, fingers drumming the wood like a coded message. Slot 16, her slot. But when her name rang out and she rose, no one foresaw what followed. The hall beyond apartment 3B always reeked of stale rugs and warmed-over pasta. That's what greeted Lena daily. That and quiet, save the noise she conjured. Once her bag thumped down, she freed her violin. No munching, no swiping her phone, no delay, just music. Relentless practice. Her chosen piece lacked a name. It didn't want one. It opened gentle, a handful of tones like whispers escaping. A sealed gap. Then came the turn, that sharp tug that snapped folks upright. That shift was her obsession. Her granddad once said, "Drag 'em through the grit, then hand 'em calm at the close." She played shoeless on the rug, toes clenching at each sour note. No sheet music. It lived in her mind and hands. They flowed, like they'd honed this for decades. But it wasn't smooth. Her bow frayed at the tips, the E string hummed if she bore down too hard. The bridge tilted faintly left. Every few hours she restrung it from zero. Still, she never griped. Her little brother Theo, 6 and endlessly nosy, parked in the doorway one night, watching. "Gonna win?" he piped up. Lena shrugged, strings still humming. "Why no cheerful tunes?" he pressed. She stopped, eyeing him. "I play 'em." He wrinkled his nose. "Sounds like sobbing sometimes." "Joy and hurt blend," she said. He didn't catch it, but bobbed his head and shuffled off. Her mom rolled in near midnight, keys clattering on the counter. Her feet puffed, her gear stank of cleaner. "Still going?" Lena sprawled on the floor, violin beside her like a dozing pup. "Nearly there." Sylvia crossed over her, slipped into the bathroom. She returned with a wet cloth, sat, and pressed it to Lena's hands. "Push too much, your hands'll quit," she cautioned. "They're half numb already." "See?" They lingered, in stillness, not stiff quiet, just the kind carved from years together. "Sure about tomorrow?" Lena didn't flicker. "Yeah." Sylvia studied her girl, her steady eyes, her firm shoulders, despite trembling fingers. "Fine, then make 'em here." Show. Morning, Lena barely ate, a plain toast scrap and a sip of water. Her hands creaked, but she flexed them loose again and again. En route to school, the gym hit her with scents of wax and crammed bodies in rickety seats. She peeked past the curtain. Crowds already packed in. Classes, faculty, custodians, even the vice principal by the exit with a clipboard. Phones everywhere. Not jitters, but a flush struck her. Hot cheeks, shaky digits, churning gut. "Tate," a backstage voice hissed. "She's 16. The murmur boomed in her ears. Lena claimed a corner, violin over her knees, eyes shut. She didn't dwell on Hensley, Tate, or the kids primed to jeer. She pictured her mom's cloth-bound hands, Theo in the frame, her granddad's advice. Make 'em feel it. That was it. But one slip, one quiver or bow snag, and it's over. They called her, fumbling the name. "Up next, Lena Carver." No instant applause, just scattered pats, mumbles, a cough, a shoe screech on the gym floor. Lena rose backstage, like a puppet on strings, violin in one fist, bow in the other, step by step to the stage. Front row kids nudged elbows, phones flicked on. She halted center, no mic, just a lone bulb humming above, and a flimsy chair dragged out for her. She didn't sit, didn't speak. She raised the violin to her shoulder. Then silence. Seconds ticked. Mr. Hensley coughed by the stage exit. Mrs. Tate edged forward, braced for the gag's payoff. Someone in the crowd whispered, "She's done." Then she struck. The first note was frail, faint. It quivered in the space, timid to exist. But she nursed it, stretched it, let it swell. By the fifth, the gym froze. No whispers, no titters, just Lena. Her piece wasn't some app hit or film track. It was richer, unpolished. Her bow swept the strings like she bared her core through motion. It began measured, careful, like a dialogue between wound and mend. Then midstream, it flipped. She twisted the strings till they keened, her left hand darting along the neck. The sound coiled, yanked, roared, like a beast clawing free. Her eyes stayed shut, not from fear, but focus. All she meant to voice poured through the strings. When she struck the peak note, she clung to it till the air thickened. Breaths halted. Even Hensley, thumbing his phone earlier, stared. Some staff leaned in, baffled, maybe guilty. Tate held her tongue. As it eased, Lena pulled the last note long, like a cord unwinding. It didn't vanish. It hung. When it stopped, she stayed. Rooted, bow lowered, violin pressed to her chest like a pulse. The gym was a tomb. Then faint, one clap from the rear, another a trickle, then a flood. No shouts, no jeers, just applause like they'd run out of reactions. Some kids dropped their phones, sheepish they'd filmed, awaiting a wreck. Jamal, mid-crowd, stood, versed. Others trailed, even the doubters who'd bet she'd flake. As Lena left the stage, no grin, no tears. She didn't need them. She just clutched the violin firmer. Backstage, Hensley dipped his head like he'd always backed her, but said zip. Nor did Tate. She seemed to choke on her quiet. Ms. Ortiz met her by the cooler, slipping her a folded slip. "You made 'em." "Feel it," she murmured. Lena unfolded it in the hall, a brief line. "When they don't bet on your light blaze anyway." That night, her mom stood by the door. No questions. She read Lena's face and nodded. "Done it?" "Yeah." "They here?" "Yeah." Sylvia hugged her, whispering into her curls. "Hope they remember." Claps die, though. Real shifts bloom post-hands. Monday dawned grey, wet asphalt scent in the air, the sort that slows folks, hushes them. Not today. When Lena crossed the school threshold, eyes shifted, not sneers or smirks, but wonder, regard. Some tipped heads, others stepped aside. A girl breathed, "That's her," like she'd spotted a star. Not fame, just notice, unasked for, now inescapable. She passed Mr. Hensley in the hall. He flashed a stiff grin, phone still gripped. "Hey, stellar stuff Friday," he stumbled. Lena gave a slight nod, kept on. Then Mrs. Tate, by her door, worksheets in hand, as ever. She paused, staring at Lena like hunting a self she'd ignored. "Miss Carver," she said, cautious. "A word?" Lena halted, didn't budge nearer. Mrs. Tate swallowed. "I owe you a sorry. Last week wasn't fair." A beat stretched. Lena met her gaze. "Shouldn't have judged, I'm figuring it out." Lena weighed a barbed reply, primed since that first snicker, but held it. Instead, she locked eyes and said, "You'd have seen me before Friday?" Mrs. Tate flinched. That cut deeper than a jab could. Lena turned, walked off. No spite, no rage, just tired of being unseen. In the lunchroom, Jamal slid her a chocolate milk, wordless. He grinned. "Duet next time?" She smirked, eyes rolling. "You ain't ready." Her laugh, small as it was, drew stares. First time most. Heard it. That night she skipped the violin, sat with Theo on the couch, cartoons muted. Her mom poked from the kitchen. "No practice." "Not tonight," Lena said. "You solid?" She mulled it, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm solid." Not all clapped from the heart. Not all who rose that day flipped instantly. But some did. And sometimes that sparks a start. Some won't clock you till you demand their ears. So sound your soul anyway. If you've been questioned, skipped, or mocked, recall Lena. Silence packs power, but your voice, however it shapes, is mightier. Share your tale. Make them hear.